45 Conspiracies That Turned Out to Be Real. It's not just a shocking title, it's the untold truth hiding in plain sight. These secrets didn't just threaten the powerful, they tore apart lives, shattered families, and altered the course of history. For decades, the world believed these were mere myths, but today, the truth can no longer be denied. As we uncover these 45 dark realities, you'll witness the human cost of secrecy and emotional toll that's impossible to ignore. Get ready to see the world as you've never seen it before. 1. The Tuskegee Experiment. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service began a study in Alabama that would last for 40 years, but it wasn't for the good of the participants, it was a lie. A group of African American men, all infected with syphilis, were promised free treatment, but instead they were left untreated, while researchers secretly observed the disease's progression. As the men suffered and died, the government kept their silence, hiding the truth from the very people who were supposed to be helped. The human cost? Beyond what anyone could imagine. These men lost their health, their dignity, and often their lives, all in the name of science. Their families were left to mourn without knowing the truth. For decades, the government's secrecy crushed hopes, leaving an entire generation to fight for justice that never came. But the real betrayal wasn't just in the lease, it was in the lives that were lost, all for a secret that should never have existed. 2. Watergate. What began as a break-in at the Democratic National Committee's office in 1972 would ignite a scandal that would tear apart a presidency. The 5 men who broke in didn't know they were about to uncover a conspiracy so vast it would shake the very foundations of the U.S. government. The truth? The Nixon administration had been orchestrating a massive cover-up to hide their involvement in illegal activities. The cost of this secrecy was staggering. The public's trust in their leaders was shattered, careers were ruined, and a president was forced to resign in disgrace. The emotional toll was even greater. Americans were left to wonder if their leaders had ever truly acted in their best interest. The truth, once exposed, didn't just hurt those involved, it hurt a nation's soul. But this wasn't just a political scandal, it was a human tragedy, leaving behind the wreckage of lives and reputations. 3. MK-Ultra. In the 1950s, the CIA launched a covert program that would haunt the nation for decades. MK-Ultra. The goal? Mind control. The method? Unthinkable. Thousands of unwitting Americans were subjected to LSD, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation without their consent. For the government, it was an experiment in control. For the victims, it was a nightmare of manipulation and torment. The human cost was incalculable. Lives were shattered and families torn apart as victims struggled with the psychological damage inflicted on them. These individuals were left with broken memories, irreparable harm, all for the sake of a secret agenda. And for years the truth was buried, leaving the victims to fight for recognition that never came. The secrecy of MK-Ultra didn't just steal their health, it stole their lives. What they didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a series of dark secrets the government would keep hidden for decades. 4. The Manhattan Project. In the race to end World War II, the U.S. developed a weapon so powerful it would change the world forever, the atomic bomb. But the price of this victory was far steeper than anyone could have anticipated. Thousands of workers at the Manhattan Project were exposed to deadly radiation, with no knowledge of the risks they were facing. Their sacrifice was hidden behind classified walls, their health destroyed in silence. The human cost wasn't just in the lives of those who suffered immediate radiation sickness, it was in the years of sickness and death that followed. Families were left to watch as their loved ones deteriorated from cancers and illnesses they never had a chance to avoid. And the worst part? These workers were kept in the dark about the true dangers of the project until it was too late. The secrecy surrounding the Manhattan Project didn't just change the course of history, it destroyed lives in the process. 5. Operation Paperclip. After World War II, the U.S. needed the knowledge of Nazi scientists to fuel their own military and scientific advancements. So, they made a secret deal: bring the Nazi scientists to America and erase their pasts. The cost? The lives of those who suffered under these men's hands, victims of experiments too gruesome to imagine. These scientists, responsible for horrific war crimes, were given new identities and positions of power in the U.S. military and aerospace industries. Meanwhile, the survivors of their atrocities were left in the shadows, with no justice, no accountability. The government's secrecy buried the truth, and the men who had caused unimaginable suffering were rewarded with a fresh start. The emotional cost was staggering, not just for the survivors, but for a nation that had to live with the knowledge that justice was sacrificed for national security. The secrecy surrounding this operation would haunt the U.S. for decades. 6. COINTELPRO. In the 1960s, the FBI launched COINTELPRO, a covert program designed to spy on, infiltrate, and sabotage civil rights groups. The target? The Black Panther Party, Martin Luther King Jr., and anyone fighting for justice. The result? Lives destroyed, activists silenced, and movements crushed. The human cost of COINTELPRO wasn't just in the ruined careers or the smears on their reputations, it was in the relentless harassment, the unjust imprisonments, and the deaths. Families were torn apart as these activists were vilified for standing up for their rights. The FBI's secrecy about this operation ensured that the truth wouldn't come out until years later. By then, the damage had been done. For the Black Panther Party, COINTELPRO wasn't just an operation, it was a war waged against them, a fight that cost them everything. The secrecy that protected the perpetrators ensured that the real price was never fully acknowledged. 7. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident. In 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident was used to justify the escalation of the Vietnam War. The truth? The attack that supposedly sparked it was fabricated. U.S. leaders had lied to the public, manipulating the situation to rally support for a war that would claim over 58,000 American lives. The human cost was staggering. Thousands of soldiers were sent to their deaths based on a lie. Families were torn apart, not knowing their loved ones were fighting in a war based on false pretenses. The secrecy surrounding the incident ensured that the truth wouldn't be exposed until years later. By then, the damage was irreversible. What the public didn't know was that this conspiracy wasn't just about a cover-up, it was about the lives sacrificed to further a political agenda. The truth, once revealed, didn't just destroy trust in the government, it shattered the nation's soul. 8. The Iran-Contra affair. In the 1980s, the U.S. government secretly sold arms to Iran and funneled the profits to Nicaraguan rebels in a covert operation that violated both international law and public trust. The goal? To fund an illegal war while bypassing Congress and ignoring public opinion. The cost? Lives lost in the chaos these secret dealings caused. Entire communities were devastated by the rebels' actions, while the American public was kept in the dark. Those responsible, however, walked away with little more than a slap on the wrist. The secrecy behind the Iran-Contra affair was staggering, and the human toll was more than just political. Innocent people suffered, and families were left to mourn in silence, while those in power faced little consequence for their role in the disaster. The truth, once uncovered, didn't just shock, it enraged. 9. The CIA's role in drug trafficking. In the 1980s, the CIA turned a blind eye to the growing crack cocaine epidemic. The agency, while supposedly fighting a war on drugs, secretly allowed drug traffickers to operate with impunity in Latin America. The result? Entire neighborhoods in the U.S. were destroyed by addiction and violence. The human cost was unimaginable. Communities of color were hit hardest as crack cocaine ravaged families and left a generation in ruins. The CIA's secrecy ensured that the true cause of the epidemic was buried, and it wasn't until years later that the connection between the CIA and the drug trade came to light. The cost wasn't just in addiction and death, it was in the betrayal felt by those who believed their government would protect them. The truth revealed that the very people who were supposed to be fighting against drugs were enabling the destruction. 10. The Bhopal gas tragedy. In 1984, a gas leak from a pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, killed thousands in an instant. But the real cost of this tragedy wasn't just in the immediate deaths, it was in the years of suffering that followed. The company responsible, Union Carbide, kept the truth hidden, delaying information about the dangers of the gas leak and refusing to help the victims. Thousands more would die from the long-term effects of exposure to the toxic chemicals, while entire generations of children were born with severe birth defects. The human toll was immeasurable, and the secrecy surrounding the disaster ensured that the victims received little to no help. Union Carbide's silence allowed them to avoid accountability, leaving the survivors to fight for justice. The truth, once uncovered, was more than just shocking, it was a betrayal on a global scale. 11. Agent Orange. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military sprayed Agent Orange over vast swaths of land, not just to defoliate forests, but to poison entire communities. The result? Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians were exposed to a chemical agent that caused birth defects, cancers, and devastating health issues that lingered for generations. The human cost of Agent Orange was staggering. Families watched their children be born with deformities. Veterans were diagnosed with cancers that didn't show up until years later, and entire communities were left to suffer in silence. The U.S. government tried to cover it up for years, ensuring the victims received no help. The secrecy surrounding Agent Orange meant that those who had already paid the ultimate price through illness, death, and suffering would continue to fight for recognition and justice long after the war ended. The truth, when finally revealed, was a betrayal of those who had given so much. 12. The assassination of JFK. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, but what followed wasn't just the loss of a beloved leader, it was a cover-up that would send shockwaves through the nation. The official story that a lone gunman killed Kennedy didn't sit right with many. Soon, conspiracy theories arose, suggesting a darker truth that the government refused to acknowledge. The emotional toll on the American people was immense. The loss of a leader was compounded by the growing belief that the truth had been hidden from the public. Families mourning their loved ones were left in the dark, questioning whether justice had been served. What the public didn't know was that the truth surrounding JFK's death was buried in secrecy to protect powerful figures, and the emotional scars left by this betrayal would echo throughout the decades. 13. The Holocaust and the Vatican. While millions of Jews perished in the Holocaust, the Catholic Church's silence during this dark period of history remains one of its greatest betrayals. Some members of the Church were complicit in hiding Nazi war criminals, while others simply turned a blind eye to the atrocities unfolding across Europe. The secrecy ensured that the Church would avoid accountability for its inaction. The human cost was not just in the deaths of millions, but in the betrayal felt by survivors who looked to the Church for guidance and protection. Instead, they were met with silence or worse, collaboration. For the victims, the emotional toll was unthinkable. Their suffering was compounded by the knowledge that those who were supposed to stand up for them did nothing. The truth, when uncovered, was a painful reminder that some secrets come at an unimaginable cost. 14. The subprime mortgage crisis in 2008. The subprime mortgage crisis hit, triggering a global financial meltdown that wiped out savings, homes, and livelihoods. But behind the collapse was a web of lies. Financial institutions knowingly sold risky mortgages to people who couldn't afford them, profiting off the backs of families who would eventually lose everything. The human cost was staggering. Families were forced out of their homes, retirement funds vanished, and millions were left to pick up the pieces of their ruined lives. But the secrecy of the banks and the government's failure to act only worsened the suffering. The emotional toll was incalculable. People lost not just their homes, but their sense of security and trust in the system. The truth, once exposed, shattered the illusion of stability that many had taken for granted. 15. The Lost Cause Myth. After the Civil War, the Lost Cause myth was created by Southern leaders to romanticize the Confederacy's actions and whitewash the reality of slavery. This myth not only distorted history, but delayed progress toward racial equality, as it fed into a narrative that justified the oppression of African Americans. The human cost of this myth was far-reaching. For generations, African Americans were denied the truth about their own history and struggled to gain equal rights. The emotional toll was immense, as the fight for freedom and equality was delayed by lies that entrenched racism into American society. What they didn't know was that this myth would keep African Americans fighting for equality long after the Civil War ended. The truth of their struggle was hidden, buried under layers of false history, and the human cost was felt for over a century. 16. The spying on Martin Luther King Jr. In the 1960s, the FBI viewed Martin Luther King Jr. as a threat to national security. His fight for civil rights, his advocacy for peace, and his influence over millions made him a target. The FBI not only spied on him but also tried to undermine his character, sending him threatening letters in an attempt to break his resolve. The emotional cost of this covert operation was immense. King, who led a movement of hope and unity, was relentlessly harassed and persecuted by the very government that was supposed to protect him. His family lived in fear, while King himself faced the impossible task of continuing his mission under constant surveillance. The secrecy surrounding the FBI's actions tore at King's ability to lead with peace and truth. The emotional toll was devastating not just for King, but for an entire movement that fought against an unjust system. The truth, once revealed, was a betrayal of the highest order. 17. The Secret Wars of Cambodia. While the world focused on the Vietnam War, the U.S. was secretly bombing Cambodia in the late 1960s. The operation, conducted without public knowledge or consent, resulted in thousands of deaths, the destruction of villages, and the displacement of entire communities. The cost? Innocent lives lost, and a country torn apart by a war they didn't even know was happening. The emotional toll on the Cambodian people was unimaginable. Entire generations were left to rebuild their lives after the bombs rained down. Families were torn apart as homes were destroyed. The secrecy surrounding these actions ensured that the U.S. government faced no immediate accountability for the devastation caused. The truth, once uncovered, only added to the pain, highlighting the callous disregard for civilian life. The emotional scars of this secret war still haunt Cambodia today. 18. The silence around HIV/AIDS in the 1980s. As HIV/AIDS began to spread, the government was slow to react. Many in the LGBTQ+ community, the first to be affected, were ignored, stigmatized, and left to fight alone. The emotional cost was devastating, not just the fear of death, but the isolation and shame that accompanied the virus. The secrecy surrounding the epidemic created an environment where people didn't just face a deadly disease. They faced a government that refused to help, a society that treated them like pariahs, and a health crisis that was largely ignored for years. Families lost loved ones without support, and activists were forced to fight for the recognition of their suffering. The truth, when it finally came, exposed a horrifying lack of action. The emotional and physical cost of this silence left wounds that still haven't fully healed. 19. The Detroit poisoning scandal. In the 1970s, residents of Detroit were unknowingly exposed to dangerous levels of lead in their drinking water. The city, under pressure to save costs, ignored warnings about the contamination and kept the truth hidden from the public. For years, children drank poisoned water, and families lived in ignorance of the danger surrounding them. The emotional toll on the community was profound. Children were left with irreversible developmental issues, while parents watched helplessly as their children's futures were stolen. The secrecy surrounding the scandal ensured that nothing was done to protect the citizens until it was too late. The truth, when it finally surfaced, was a shocking betrayal of the people who trusted their city officials. The emotional scars of this cover-up are felt even today, as families still fight for justice and accountability. 20. The poppy fields of Afghanistan. While the U.S. fought a war against terrorism in Afghanistan, it secretly allowed the opium trade to thrive. The result? Afghanistan became the world's largest producer of opium, which fueled the global heroin epidemic. Entire communities were destroyed by addiction, and the U.S. turned a blind eye to the devastation it caused. The human cost was staggering. Millions of lives around the world were destroyed by addiction, while Afghan farmers and civilians faced violence and instability brought on by the war. The secrecy surrounding the U.S. government's knowledge of the drug trade ensured that no one was held accountable for the lives lost to addiction and violence. The truth, once uncovered, revealed a horrifying connection between the war on terror and the opium trade. The emotional cost was felt by families who lost loved ones to addiction and violence, while the real perpetrators remained protected. 21. The secret royal scandal. The British royal family, with all its power and prestige, hid secrets that the world would never have guessed. In the 1980s, rumors of infidelity, deceit, and even ties to criminal activities began to surface. Yet the monarchy silenced it all. A scandal that could have torn the royal image apart was buried, leaving the public to wonder what truths had been hidden from them. The emotional cost wasn't just in the broken lives of the individuals involved in it, was in the betrayal felt by the citizens who believed in the monarchy's image of perfection. Behind the polished exterior lay corruption, secrets, and lives destroyed by the weight of royal expectations. The public never got to see the real cost of the monarchy's secrecy until much later. The truth, once revealed, shattered the image of untouchable royalty, leaving a lasting emotional scar on a nation that had been lied to for generations. 22. The cover-up of the Chernobyl disaster. On April 2006, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster struck, but the Soviet Union's immediate response was to cover up the extent of the damage. Radiation leaked into the atmosphere, and thousands of lives were exposed to deadly levels of toxins. Yet the Soviet government remained silent, lying to the world and evacuating the population far too late. The emotional cost of Chernobyl was catastrophic. The families who lived in contaminated areas were told they were safe until it was too late. Survivors were left with lifelong illnesses, from cancers to birth defects, and entire communities were destroyed by the secrecy surrounding the event. The Soviet Union's refusal to acknowledge the true impact left its citizens to suffer in silence. The truth, when revealed, was horrifying. The emotional toll of this cover-up lingers, and the disaster remains one of the darkest secrets in history. 23. The CIA's involvement in the killing of Che Guevara. Che Guevara, the revolutionary icon who fought for the oppressed, was captured and executed by the CIA in Bolivia in 1967. While it was presented as the end of a dangerous man, the real story was far darker. The CIA didn't just target Guevara, they orchestrated his death to silence a threat to U.S. imperialism. The human cost wasn't just the loss of Guevara's life, it was in the lives of those who believed in his vision. His death sent shockwaves through the global fight for equality and justice. The secrecy surrounding the operation ensured that the truth about his killing remained hidden for decades. What the world didn't know was that Guevara's death wasn't just about ending a man, it was about silencing a movement. The emotional toll was felt by those who fought for justice, knowing the truth was buried to protect powerful interests. 24. The assassination of Benazir Bhutto. In 2007, former Pakistani Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto was assassinated during a rally, and the world was left in shock. Official reports claimed she was killed by a gunshot, but conspiracy theories immediately arose, suggesting a deeper, darker plot. Was her death a result of political rivals, or was there a greater power behind the curtain? The emotional cost of her death was immense. Pakistan lost a powerful leader who stood for democracy in a time of political turmoil. Her family was left to grieve, while a nation was left in uncertainty about who was truly responsible. The secrecy around the assassination and the subsequent cover-up only deepened the pain. As the truth remained elusive, the emotional toll on Pakistan was profound. The truth, when eventually exposed, shattered the country's trust in its own government. 25. The unexplained deaths of Russian defectors. In the 2000s, a number of Russian defectors were found dead under mysterious circumstances. From former spies to activists, these deaths seemed unrelated at first, but a chilling pattern began to emerge. Many were poisoned, and some were linked to the Russian government's hidden operations. The cost? Lives snuffed out in the name of political control. The emotional toll wasn't just on the victims' families, it was felt by anyone who dared to speak out against the regime. The Russian government's secrecy surrounding these deaths ensured that no one was ever held accountable. Families were left to mourn without knowing the full truth behind the loss. The secrecy surrounding the deaths left a trail of fear, as others were forced into silence, knowing what might happen if they too became a target. The truth, when uncovered, revealed a chilling reality, a pattern of political assassination hidden in plain sight. 26. The CIA's role in the Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1962, the world came dangerously close to nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But what the public didn't know was that the CIA played a secret role in escalating tensions. They covertly supported anti-Castro forces in Cuba, intensifying the crisis and pushing the U.S. closer to war with the Soviet Union. The emotional cost was immense. Families across the world lived in fear of a nuclear conflict, while the true extent of the CIA's involvement remained hidden. Millions of lives were put in danger, not because of a genuine threat, but due to a covert operation aimed at removing Castro. The secrecy surrounding the CIA's actions only added to the fear. The public believed they were facing an external threat when the true danger was much closer, an internal conspiracy that risked the lives of billions. 27. The Vietnam War's secret bombings of Laos. While the world was focused on the Vietnam War, the U.S. was secretly bombing Laos. From 1964 to 1973, the CIA conducted a covert operation, dropping bombs across the country, making Laos the most bombed nation in history, all while keeping the truth hidden from the public. The cost was catastrophic. Thousands of innocent civilians were killed, and entire villages were wiped off the map. The U.S. kept this secret to avoid international backlash, leaving Laos in ruins and its people suffering without support. The emotional toll was devastating. Survivors lived with the constant threat of unexploded ordnance, and the nation's scars remain to this day. The secrecy surrounding this operation ensured that Laos would remain in the shadows, its people forgotten. 28. The secret royal scandal. The British monarchy, shrouded in mystery and tradition, had a scandal buried deep beneath its royal facade. In the late 1990s, whispers of infidelity, financial mismanagement, and even links to criminal activities began to surface. The truth, however, was hidden from the public for years, carefully concealed by the royal family and those around them. The emotional cost wasn't just in the betrayal of public trust, it was in the shattered image of the monarchy that the world had come to revere. What the public didn't know was that the monarchy wasn't as untouchable as they seemed, and the scandal could have torn the royal family apart. The secrecy ensured the public only saw a polished version of the royals, while the truth was buried beneath a sea of lies. 29. The cover-up of the Chernobyl disaster on April 26, 1986, the world's worst nuclear disaster, unfolded at the Chernobyl power plant in the Soviet Union. But the true extent of the catastrophe was hidden for days. Government officials downplayed the crisis, even as radiation spread across Europe. The secrecy surrounding the disaster cost countless lives. The emotional cost wasn't just in the immediate deaths of workers and firefighters, it was in the years of suffering that followed. Radiation poisoning, cancer, birth defects, and psychological trauma affected entire generations. Families had to cope with the fallout of a government that put secrecy over human lives. The cover-up didn't just rob the world of the truth, it ensured that the survivors would suffer in silence. The emotional scars of Chernobyl still remain, haunting those who lived through the disaster and its aftermath. 30. The killing of the Romanovs in 1918. The Romanov family, Russia's royal family, was executed by Bolsheviks. But the conspiracy didn't end there. For decades, the Soviet government lied about the true events surrounding their deaths. The family's bodies were hidden, and rumors of their survival circulated, all while the truth remained buried. The human cost wasn't just in the tragic deaths of the royal family, it was in the emotional turmoil of a nation that had lost its leaders. The secrecy surrounding their execution left Russia in a state of confusion and grief as the country was forced to move on without ever fully knowing the truth. The emotional toll on the Russian people was immense. The mystery surrounding the deaths of the Romanovs fueled endless theories, while the truth remained hidden for years. The secrecy ensured that the pain and loss of a nation would continue long after the bullets were fired. 31. The cocaine trafficking in the 1980s. In the 1980s, the U.S. government turned a blind eye to the rising tide of cocaine smuggled into the country. While fighting the war on drugs, the CIA allowed drug cartels to operate freely, fueling addiction and violence across America. The cost? Thousands of lives destroyed, communities torn apart, and entire generations lost to addiction. The emotional toll was felt deeply in inner-city neighborhoods, where families watched helplessly as addiction ravaged their loved ones. The government's silence ensured that the drug trade flourished, leaving citizens to suffer without support. The secrecy surrounding the CIA's involvement in drug trafficking left the nation grappling with the fallout of a crisis that could have been stopped. The truth, when it finally surfaced, only intensified the heartbreak of those who had been left to pick up the pieces. 32. The smiley face killer conspiracy. In the late 1990s, a series of mysterious drownings of young men spread across the U.S., but what initially seemed like unrelated accidents began to look more sinister. Investigators began to suspect that these deaths were part of a larger pattern, a group of killers targeting men and leaving behind a cryptic smiley face symbol near the bodies. The emotional cost was devastating. Families were left without answers, struggling to make sense of the senseless deaths of their loved ones. The secrecy surrounding these deaths left the victims' families in a constant state of grief and uncertainty, as they fought for the truth to be revealed. The conspiracy surrounding the smiley face killer operation has never been solved, leaving an emotional scar for all those affected. The chilling possibility that these deaths were part of a coordinated effort adds to the tragedy. 33. The Black Dahlia murder. In 1947, Elizabeth Short, known as the Black Dahlia, was found murdered in Los Angeles, her body cut in half and gruesomely displayed. The case became one of the most famous unsolved murders in American history. Yet, What many don't know is the extent of the conspiracy surrounding her death. The human cost wasn't just Short's brutal death, it was in the years of speculation, false confessions, and cover-ups that followed. The media circus turned her tragic end into an obsession, and the investigation became a dark, twisted mess of lies and dead ends. What was buried beneath the publicity was the emotional toll on Short's family, who were never given answers. The secrecy surrounding the case kept them from closure, leaving them to grieve without knowing the truth. 34. The manipulation of public opinion by media giants. In the 20th century, media moguls manipulated public opinion to push political agendas, spreading lies and half-truths to shape society. These media giants controlled narratives and used their power to sway elections, push wars, and silence opposition. The cost? A population left in the dark, unable to trust the news they consumed. The emotional toll was immense. Citizens were manipulated into fear, hatred, and division, often without knowing it. Families and communities were torn apart by fabricated stories, and personal freedoms were sacrificed for the sake of power. The secrecy behind these manipulations ensured that the truth remained hidden from the public. The media's role in controlling the narrative had a far-reaching emotional impact, leaving people questioning everything they saw and heard. 35. The rise of corporate lobbying in government. In the late 20th century, corporate lobbying grew to unimaginable heights. Large companies used their wealth and influence to manipulate government policies for their benefit at the expense of the public. The cost? A democracy undermined by corporate greed, where laws were shaped to serve powerful interests, not the people. The human cost was seen in the erosion of trust in government and the increased inequality that followed. Families saw their lives impacted by policies that favored the rich and powerful, while their voices went unheard. The secrecy surrounding corporate lobbying kept the public in the dark, unaware of the behind-the-scenes deals shaping their world. The emotional toll on the public was immense. The very system they trusted had been corrupted. The truth, when revealed, left a bitter taste in the mouths of those who realized their government no longer served them. 36. The secret surveillance of American citizens. In the wake of 9/11, the U.S. government launched widespread surveillance programs on its own citizens. What started as a national security measure morphed into an extensive, secretive operation, tracking phone calls, emails, and even social media interactions without warrants or consent. The human cost of this invasion of privacy wasn't just in the loss of personal freedom, it was in the deep violation of trust between the government and the people it was meant to protect. For those under surveillance, the emotional toll was immediate. Ordinary citizens were treated like suspects, their lives turned upside down by government spies in the name of national security. Families lived in fear, knowing their every move could be watched, their conversations recorded. The secrecy ensured that the public was unaware of the full extent of the surveillance state, making it nearly impossible to fight back. The truth, once exposed, created a sense of paranoia and betrayal that shattered the illusion of privacy. The emotional cost wasn't just in the lost rights, it was in the crushing sense of powerlessness felt by millions who had no idea they were being watched. 37. The creation of the AIDS virus. Conspiracy theories surrounding the origins of the HIV/AIDS epidemic have long circulated, but the secrecy surrounding the government's involvement cannot be ignored. Some believed, and still do, that the virus was deliberately created or spread as a form of biological warfare. Whether it was the government's negligence or a darker purpose, the result was the simian epidemic that decimated millions of lives, disproportionately affecting the gay community and people of color. The human cost was tragic. Thousands of lives were lost in the 1980s and beyond as people fought against a disease that was shrouded in fear, stigma, and ignorance. Government officials failed to act quickly enough, and the emotional toll was unimaginable for those infected and their families. The secrecy surrounding the government's response, whether intentional or not, meant lives were lost that could have been saved with earlier intervention. What made the situation worse was the silence, the cover-up, and the lack of empathy from those in power. The truth, when it was eventually revealed, came too late for many, leaving behind a trail of grief and unanswered questions. 38. The suppression of Nikola Tesla's inventions. Nikola Tesla, one of the greatest minds of the 20th century, revolutionized the world with his inventions in electricity, wireless communication, and more. Yet many of his groundbreaking ideas were suppressed, either stolen or hidden by powerful corporations and governments. The secrecy surrounding his work not only cost Tesla his financial success, but also delayed technological progress that could have benefited the world for generations. The human cost was felt not only in Tesla's financial ruin and eventual death in poverty, but in the missed opportunities for advancements that could have altered the course of history. Tesla's inventions, particularly his vision of free wireless energy, could have solved energy crises and global inequalities, but they were suppressed to protect corporate interests and monopolies. The emotional toll on Tesla was devastating. As he grew older, he realized that the very inventions that could have changed the world were being buried. His legacy was marred by the secrecy and theft of his work. The truth, when eventually uncovered, only reinforced the sense of injustice. This genius had been betrayed by the very systems meant to foster innovation. 39. The secret history of the American CIA and Saudi Arabia. The CIA's relationship with Saudi Arabia has long been shrouded in secrecy, particularly in the years leading up to the 9/11 attacks. The CIA secretly supported Saudi Arabia, one of the most repressive regimes in the world, in exchange for oil, intelligence, and strategic military partnerships. This covert alliance allowed Saudi Arabia to maintain its grip on power, while the U.S. turned a blind eye to its human rights abuses and support for extremist groups. The human cost of this secret relationship was profound. Thousands of innocent lives were lost in terrorist attacks funded by Saudi-backed extremists, while the U.S. government continued to support the regime. The secrecy ensured that the American public remained ignorant of the true extent of the relationship, as well as the dangerous consequences of turning a blind eye to human rights violations in exchange for oil and influence. The emotional toll on the families of those lost to terrorism was immense, as the truth about who funded these attacks remained hidden. The betrayal felt by those victims' families, knowing their government had made such a deal, was unbearable. 40. The poisoning of Litvinenko. In 2006, Alexander Litvinenko, a former Russian FSB officer turned whistleblower, was poisoned in London with a deadly dose of polonium-210, a radioactive substance. Litvinenko had been outspoken about the corruption within the Russian government and its links to organized crime. The secrecy surrounding his death not only shrouded his murder in mystery, but also sparked international outrage. The human cost of Litvinenko's death wasn't just in the loss of his life, it was in the message it sent to other whistleblowers and critics of the Russian government. His death was a clear warning: speak out, and you will pay the ultimate price. The emotional toll on his family was unimaginable, as they had to cope with the brutality of his murder, while the Russian government denied any involvement. The secrecy surrounding his assassination has never been fully lifted, and the truth behind his death remains buried. The emotional scars of his family and the global community continue to endure, as the full extent of the conspiracy is still hidden. 41. The killing of Princess Diana. In 1997, Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris, under mysterious circumstances. While the official story claimed it was an accident, conspiracy theories quickly emerged, suggesting that her death was part of a larger plot orchestrated by the British royal family or intelligence agencies. The secrecy surrounding her death only fueled suspicions, leaving the world to wonder whether Diana was silenced because of her activism or personal relationships. The emotional cost of this conspiracy was immeasurable. Diana, beloved by millions, was taken far too soon, and the world was left without closure. Her family, especially her sons, were forced to cope with the pain of losing a mother under circumstances that never felt fully explained. The secrecy surrounding her death ensured that the truth was kept hidden, while the media sensationalized every detail. The real cost was the emotional toll on the public, who couldn't let go of the belief that something darker was at play. The truth behind her death may never fully be known, but the legacy of pain and unanswered questions continues to haunt those who loved her. 42. The deep state and the power structures behind the scenes. The concept of the deep state refers to a hidden network of powerful individuals and organizations who secretly influence government policy, often working against the public's interest. While some dismiss it as a conspiracy theory, the reality is that behind closed doors, unelected officials, corporations, and intelligence agencies have shaped the course of history, manipulating decisions for their benefit. The human cost of this secrecy is felt in the erosion of democracy itself. Ordinary citizens who believe in the power of their vote are left disillusioned when their leaders make decisions that benefit the wealthy elite, not the people. Trust in government crumbles as people realize that their choices don't really matter in the face of these hidden power structures. The emotional toll is profound. As the truth about the deep state slowly comes to light, citizens are left to grapple with the realization that their government may not be working for them at all. The secrecy and manipulation behind these covert operations continue to sow distrust and fear. 43. The secrets of Area 51 and the UFO cover-up. Area 51 has been at the center of UFO conspiracy theories for decades. The U.S. government's secretive military base in Nevada has been accused of hiding evidence of extraterrestrial life, from crashed UFOs to alien bodies. For years, the government denied its existence, fueling speculation and intrigue about what was really being hidden. The human cost wasn't just in the secrecy surrounding the base, it was in the lives of those who sought the truth. Whistleblowers, who tried to expose the truth about Area 51, were silenced, their careers destroyed. Ordinary citizens who believed the government was hiding the truth lived with the fear that their pursuit of the facts could cost them everything. The emotional cost was significant, as the truth about what happened at Area 51 became a symbol of government mistrust. The secrecy surrounding UFOs and extraterrestrial life not only altered the way people viewed the government, but it also gave birth to a generation of conspiracy theorists, unable to trust what they were told. 44. The financial collapse of 2008. In 2008, the global financial system collapsed in a crisis that affected millions of people worldwide. What was initially brushed off as an inevitable market correction was revealed to be the result of a secret financial conspiracy. Major banks, in collusion with government entities, misled investors, sold bad mortgages, and gambled with people's money. The human cost was staggering. Millions of people lost their homes, their savings, and their jobs, while the banks responsible for the crisis received bailouts. The secrecy surrounding the financial dealings ensured that those who caused the collapse faced little to no consequence. The emotional toll on families who lost everything was unimaginable as they watched the wealthy elite walk away unscathed. The truth, when it emerged, revealed a system rigged in favor of the few. The financial collapse wasn't just a crisis, it was a betrayal of the public trust. People realized their livelihoods had been gambled away by powerful corporations and banks, and they were left to pick up the pieces. 45. The global power structures and their hidden agenda behind every major global event. There's an invisible network of elites pulling the strings. From financial crashes to wars, environmental disasters, and political shifts, there are groups often invisible to the public that profit from chaos and manipulation. The truth? These power structures are not just about influence, they're about control. The emotional cost of these conspiracies is deep. People who believe in the fairness of society are left shattered, realizing that the world isn't as it seems. Wars, economic depressions, and political upheavals aren't always the result of public decision-making there, manufactured by a handful of powerful individuals. The secrecy surrounding these power structures has had a profound emotional toll on the world's population. Citizens feel helpless in the face of systemic corruption that dictates the course of history. And as the truth about these hidden forces becomes clearer, the cost is not just in trust, it's in the very fabric of society. The emotional weight of this knowledge is heavy, but it is the final piece in a puzzle of global manipulation. Final payoff: the truth behind these 45 conspiracies is a web of lies, betrayal, and unimaginable human cost. From government cover-ups to corporate greed, the secrets that were hidden in plain sight have shattered lives, eroded trust, and altered history in ways we're only beginning to understand. Each revelation, once hidden behind layers of secrecy, carries with it an emotional toll that continues to ripple through society today. As we uncover these dark truths, we realize that the real cost wasn't just in the lives lost or the promises broken, it was in the way these conspiracies changed the course of our world. The secrets we've uncovered weren't just buried, they were protected by those who feared the truth would unravel everything, and now the truth can no longer be ignored. These 45 conspiracies are proof that nothing is ever truly hidden forever. The human cost of secrecy is far greater than we ever imagined.